All the roads are winding.
Welcome to the show, the one and only Shawna Cason of EarthSpeak, our co-founder. I am thrilled to get to interview you, Shawna. Hi.
Hi, Natalie. I'm excited to be here. Also a little nervous because I'm usually behind the scenes.
I know, for listeners, I've been coaxing Shawna. I'm like, when are you going to tell your stories? When are you going to tell your stories? So here it is. Yes, I'm so excited. Thanks for just stepping out from behind the scenes and sharing. I think this will be a really medicinal conversation.
Yeah, thank you for encouraging me to share this.
Totally. So let's get started with we talked about this when we had our initial Meet the Team podcast a year ago. It's been a year. It's like EarthSpeak's year birthday. I think EarthSpeak's 1 year old.
Oh my gosh. Yay.
But we talked about this in that podcast, but I think it's been a year. So let's do that again. What is your ancestral lineage?
That's a good question because I have many. On my mom's side, my lineage is European and Irish. My grandmother is from Silesia, and my grandpa that I never met on my mom's side his family is from Ireland. And on my dad's side, it is primarily African American and a lot of other things we're not totally sure of.
Amazing. And I remember in our conversation last year, there was like a bunch of different places in Africa that you had done an ancestry test, right?
Yeah, I did an ancestral test and it was just like, oh, so scattered. It was mostly on the west coast of Africa, but a little like everywhere. There's some Native American, but it was such a small percentage that it doesn't even say where. And I don't even know how well ancestral tests pick up on indigenous. So.
Right. Has their database for that, right?
Right.
Cool. And how would you say you experience your intuition?
I experience my intuition in many ways. I am clairaudient and I feel very intuitively. So my intuition comes through first as a feeling, and I feel that in my throat generally, sometimes in my heart, depending on what the energy is, also sometimes in my solar plexus. And if I ignore those, that's when I become that clairaudient version and I start hearing things telling me messages and trying to freak me out.
like give me my space. That's when yeah. So like if you sense some sensation in your throat, for instance, what do you do with it? How do you engage?
So if it's in my throat, that usually is an indication now that I know spirit is trying to communicate, and usually spirit outside of myself. So not my higher self, not my spirit support team, but somebody else, something else. And so at that point, I really have to attune to that frequency and decide, do they come in a good way? Or do they not? Is this something I'm willing and ready to engage with? And then if so, I just drop in to see what's up.
Well, would you consider yourself a medium?
I do consider myself a medium, and it's taken me many, 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 many years of being okay with that term.
How so? Like what was the resistance?
Well, I grew up in Christianity, and that was just like really cast down upon. And it just wasn't something I felt comfortable with, even which I've only just now started reclaiming that as a part of who I am inherently. And so I still cringe a little bit when I hear the word medium. But yes, I think that would be the accurate term.
So like as a kid, were you experiencing your mediumship but not knowing what it was, and then Christianity was telling you like this is Satan? Is that like kind of what happened?
Yeah. So, oh, there's so many instances. Like, I remember being a young kid, being at my grandpa's house. Like, it wasn't uncommon during summers for my dad to drop my brother and I off at my grandpa's, who lived in the country. He was a farmer. And it was so far in the country in Texas where when it's nighttime, you don't see anything. Like, it's black in the house. There's no noise pollution outside. It's dark. And I remember being in bed and having this feeling that something was watching me, and that freaked me out. So I went to go try to lay by my brother. Later, I would get in trouble for this, but he would sleep on a couch that kind of had a little bit of space in between the couch and the floor. And I would try to get as close to him as I possibly could without laying on him. So I would get like as much as I could under the couch because I'd be freaked out, and he wouldn't wake up. He sleeps like a log. And so I was there, and I'm trying to just like go to sleep. I'm trying to talk myself out of like this feeling that I have. And then the back door opened,
Oh no.
and I heard footsteps, and I saw an apparition, and it went in towards the kitchen, and I woke him up. I was like freaking out, like, get up, get up, get up. Like, this happened. And he was like, what? Go back to sleep. And I'm like, no, 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 no. And so I finally got him up, and we go explore, and there was nothing there. And my grandpa heard us, and he got up, and they're like, just like, go back to sleep. You had a bad dream. And I'm like, no, that was not a dream. Like, I legitimately saw this. And that's probably where I started to be like, I don't want to see anything,
Oh yeah.
because it just freaked me out. Like, being able to see something that's not of this world is, to me, it was very jarring and terrifying. And so, yeah, just from that point, trying to explore it in a way that made sense with Christianity, but it really didn't. And even feeling things so deeply, like my mom would always be like, you're so sensitive. Like, stop being so sensitive. And I'm like, I don't know how. This is me. But I remember I loved to read. Reading was my escape from everything. And so she dropped me off at the library, and I got a bunch of books on earth elements and earth spirituality. And like, at the time, I didn't know that was the term, earth spirituality. I just thought like, oh wow, this is like very, I love reading about the elements and like figuring out how it relates to our world. And it was like, oh, my whole world got blown open at that point, because it's not anything that I was ever taught.
How old were you about?
This time I was probably about 12. And I'm just like, I feel like I just discovered a treasure trove of knowledge, and I'm reading, and I'm going back, and I'm getting other books, and like just keep going through everything. And my mom came to get me, but she also wanted to find a book. So she came and sat down by me, and she was like, oh, what are you reading? Like, very innocent. And she sees, and she totally, like, she was like, no, like, we don't read these things. Let's put them up. And I don't want to see you reading anything like this ever again.
Wow. How'd you feel?
I didn't understand, because to me, it felt normal. Like, it felt like it made more sense than what I was taught as a way of being in the world. So I didn't understand it. And, I'm my mom's only girl. So I feel like she was also a lot harder on me than she was with my brothers. And I think, maybe that's just not an avenue she wanted me to go, because she wasn't comfortable with it, but also like, as her only daughter, like having very high standards of who I would be in the world. And that's just not a part of the story she wanted for me.
Yeah, totally.
And so after that point, I definitely like kind of cast it aside a little bit. But I couldn't really. Like it just grew. It just grew more and more. And, I would go to church. My family, we'd go to church like off and on. They're really more of, you can be an independent Christian, study at home, but you can also go to church. And so, that was a decision that was left up to us usually, depending on who I was with, either my mom and stepdad or my dad and stepmom. And, yeah. And actually, as I'm saying this, there's another part that I just remembered that I think is actually pretty key, which is that growing up with my dad, when my dad had custody of us, and even during summers, we spent a lot of time with my grandma, with his mom. And she is, I don't even know the correct term, maybe evangelical type Christian. I grew up going to Black churches, which we would also call a tabernacle. And everyone's jumping up and down, speaking in tongues. And it was almost like that was expected of you once you became a certain age. But what was different about my grandma is that if we behaved in a way that she didn't like, we were possessed.
Oh, wow. Like by demons or entities?
By demons or entities, exactly. Either one. Generally, she would just say the devil. And so my brother and I in particular, grew up getting exorcised.
What did that look like?
Sometimes she'd try to do it herself, but we'd also go to the church where her pastor would do it, and there was a lot of like laying of the hands. He'd put like some sacred oil on our third eye and like would shake us, and that's actually really terrifying.
Oh my gosh. Especially as a kid who's just this innocent kid just doing kid stuff.
Yeah, and the last time it happened, I remember it was because my uncle had he's like the fun uncle. He doesn't have kids of his own. And so whenever he'd come into town, he would fill his back seat up with all kinds of goodies. Like I have so many cousins. So he would come and he'd be like, just get a whole handful, as much as you can. And it would be candy, toys, Pokemon cards. And my brother and I loved Pokemon. And we would play together and, collect all the cards we could. And this summer was the summer that Pokemon was huge. And oh my gosh, we were over the moon. So excited, especially because it was the summertime. We were in the country. We were cut off from our friends. This is before cell phones. And, yeah, so she found those and freaked out and said that we were possessed and we had to be exorcised and we weren't allowed to have them.
Wow. And that's the last time you got exorcised?
That was the last time I got exorcised.
Wow. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. That's amazing. So growing up in this, really, it sounds like you had a kind of spectrum of religious experiences from your grandma to your kind of laissez-faire, hands off, like go to church if you want, but just, there's a boundary. You can't read about those earthy books and earth spirituality books, but you don't have to go to church. Like there's this kind of spectrum. How did that evolve, as you got older, became more of a teenager and growing towards adulthood? How did that inform what you wanted to do with your life and who you were becoming?
That's interesting because it has been many journeys, many different avenues to get to where I am today. And even though there was this inherent part of me that knew there was something more than what I was being taught, I was still connected to spirituality. I was still connected to the divine in a very intense way. I wanted to learn how to speak in tongue, because I was taught that's a higher way of connection. I loved church. I was in our church choir. I would go on all the church trips. I would be a teenager at the park while other kids are playing and I'm reading my Bible.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's just an example. And I thought so much so. I did lose my virginity until I was an adult because I wanted to save that for marriage. And, yeah, I leaned very heavily into Christianity as a part of my spiritual identity. So much so that when I went to college, I wanted to be a pastor, even though women aren't necessarily allowed. I wanted to defy that and do it and lead a youth worship group, because my form of connection was very much based in music. I wanted to share that with others.
Did you ever learn to speak in tongues?
No, it's not something that I don't think I ever really was able to fully let myself go enough of like not caring what other people thought, or maybe even myself, to enough to be able to do that. But I remember being in this like Sunday school trying, like learning, like trying. But my aunt, she's kind of more of like my godmom, told me, you can't force it. It just comes.
Mm-hmm.
It never came for me, and that's okay.
Right. And it's maybe not meant for everyone. And, you told us that as a kid, you could sense, you had that freaky experience, with the apparition, but were you also aware of that connection with the divine? Was that also something that was apparent in your life, even if it just seemed normal to you?
Yes, there were times when I would ignore it, like I would know it's there, and it's because of where I would sense it in my throat, and so if I sense it here, I know it's there. Um, there was one time, and this was probably the beginning of me not being able to deny my mediumship, which is I would go meet my bus driver. I was in high school. I think I was a junior or senior at the time, probably junior. I'd meet my bus driver at the school and just hang out with her before all the other kids came, and reading my book. And it'd be because it's like winter and it's cold and I don't like cold weather. Um, and so we were just hanging out, and I got that feeling in my throat. And I don't know how to explain it other than there are points when I have to say something. Like if I don't, it hurts. I feel like I have this ball in my throat. And there are times when it's like an outer body experience where I almost, at that time, felt like I didn't have control.
Oh, wow.
I definitely have learned how to navigate that, but in this particular instance, I had just asked her, um, I was like, your husband, do you have a husband? And she was like, yeah, I'm married. And I'm like, okay, well, um, I'm being told to tell you that I love you. Everything's going to be okay. And to let go, let me go. And I remember the look on her face as being very shocked, not necessarily like maybe she wanted to cry, but just like not totally understanding why I was saying this. And she was also very sweet, so she was just kind of like, okay, um, thank you. And later, after we started the bus route, and by the time we had gotten to our high school, she had asked me to hang back, and I did. And she was like, my husband's on life support.
Wow.
Yeah. And shortly after that, he was taken off.
Wow, Shawna.
And that moment was so defining, to the point to where like my best friend at the time was with me, and I told her about this. And she was kind of open to me talking about these things, but also didn't fully understand. It was an intense moment.
That is so intense. And, you're a kid still, you're almost an adult, but it's like, oh, that's a lot to like handle and just hold. Wow.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow. So moving on from that, there's all these instances of your connection with spirit, but it doesn't necessarily fit into the structure you were taught or brought up in. As there's a lot of right or wrong going on in Christianity, and a lot of what you were feeling was on the wrong side, right?
It was. And this time, like in my life, that year in particular, when this happened, is really when I started to dig into the Bible, like avidly in search of answers. And somebody would be like, what's your interest in religion and Christianity? Like, it was abnormal to people in my circle at that time because I hung out with a lot of punks. And by punks, I don't mean like bad kids. I mean like we were punk. We were into punk rock, grunge, skateboarding. That was a scene. And so there was a lot who weren't raised in religion and they considered themselves to be agnostic or atheist. So it was weird for me to them to be in this scene and be so Christian. I was straight edge at the time. I didn't drink. I didn't do drugs. I didn't talk about inappropriate things. I didn't have sex. Like, I would be uncomfortable sometimes with even making out. So it was really weird for them. But I started to really dig into the answers, and I would tell them, like, my interest in religion is I want to know what happens after we die.
Uh-huh.
Because what I'm told, I know there's something more than that. I know there's something more than that. And so I really started to dig into that. And I also started to rebel in church. Like, and by that, I mean asking really hard questions to where I get pulled aside afterwards, especially around like in Christianity. I went to this Bible camp and they were talking about dating other Christians, and somebody had asked the question, well, my boyfriend is Jewish. And I didn't like the response that the pastor said. I thought it was very rude. And somebody had also asked a question about, well, I have a gay best friend. And I also didn't like his response. And so I raised my hand and he was like, what's your question? And I'm just like, why would God, if there's predestination and God is in control, why would he enable somebody to live a life of being gay when it's so hard for them? And this was before like gay rights really, really, really was pushed. And I'm like, I can't imagine my version of God not being willing to accept everyone because they're humans. And after that, I was asked to not come back.
Oh, that's how they dealt with it.
That's how they dealt with it. Yeah.
Like, she's a goner. She's too far gone.
I just don't think they were equipped to answer my questions. I had a lot more questions after that, but it was just like, to them, I was ripping their entire sermon apart and they weren't prepared for it. So it was very frustrating, especially because these are people that I had looked up to. And when I would ask them about, being able to sense the dead and speak to the dead, be like, no, that's demonic. That's taboo. I was literally told one time, if you can speak to the dead, you're not Christian.
Wow.
Really? No. This is what defines being Christian. Do you believe that Jesus Christ died for our sins? Yes or no? No, I don't. I'm not Christian. That was the moment. I was in a religious studies class, just having studied the history and evolution of religion. And before I took this class, my professor had said, if you don't want to question your religion, do not take my class. And I remember thinking like, nobody's going to shake my love for Jesus. Like that was literally a thought that I had. And, well, it did. because I started really to dig in what defines being Christian. Somebody told me I'm not Christian because I sense dead people. There has to be other Christians who sense dead people. Like, this is insane. And I found, just like Google search, I did find other Christians who were mediums, but it still didn't answer what defines you as a Christian. And it came down to that one question. Do you believe Jesus died for our sins and rose from the dead? No. And it was that same day that I answered the question to myself that I went home, I called my best friend, the same one that was with me in high school, the same one who knew my journey, and told her, I have prayed about this. I have cried. I've gone through a spiritual warfare in my heart. I no longer identify as Christian.
Wow. What was her response?
She said, well, I'll pray for you, but you're walking the path of the devil, and I can no longer associate myself with you. And that tore me apart. The worst breakup I've ever had in my life.
The breakup with Jesus.
The breakup with Jesus, but also the breakup of my best friend. Like, we were inseparable. I loved her so much, and it was really, really hard, especially because we moved around so much. It wasn't easy for me to let people in, and I let her in. And this is somebody I thought who would understand, and maybe I'd come back to Christianity. I thought I would, honestly. I prayed. I was like, God, if I need to go on this journey, and I hope you understand, and I hope that I find my way back. But I never found my way back.
Oh, gosh. That's amazing. So after that, what happened? How did you find your next step forward? I mean, obviously there was a lot of like soul searching and kind of, it was a breakup that sucks, but what happened from then on?
From that point, spirit activity picked up a lot, and a series of synchronicities began to happen. I was in class, and actually Dr. Daniel Thor came to teach our class that I was in at the moment, and he was talking about the indigenous and not only Native American ways, but just the indigenous from all over in terms of ancestral connection and all of those things. And at this time, it was like this huge epiphany. I had to leave and cry. Like, that's how big it was. I left the classroom to go bawl my eyes out because I just had this huge breakup. And it was a matter of weeks. It wasn't like months apart. This was a matter of weeks. He comes in and just like blows my mind wide open. And it's like hitting every aspect of life that I knew deep down to be true. And at the time, so my family on my dad's side, we always thought we were African and Native American. And it was just a thing that we were told, like, we had a lot of Native American in us. And so I clung to that because here I am listening to this incredible person explain everything that I just felt so deeply. And it's so woven into Native American spirituality. And it was for the first time that I felt I was connected to something. Like, okay, here's a thread that I have to follow. And so I followed it. And I did a journey with him and a small group of people that I'm still very good friends with to this day. And it was an amazing experience. And I mean, there were no psychedelics involved. Like, it was just us, spirit, and our ancestors. And it was amazing. And I knew there was something there. And I had called my aunt. I have a favorite aunt that is hilarious, but she's also, she's very Christian, but knows my journey and I can talk to her about it openly. And I had told her about this experience and she was like, well, you know, it really makes sense that you would follow this path. And this is when I had started getting into herbalism too. So she had known a little bit about this. And she was like, because one of our like great, great, great grandmothers, I don't remember how many great, was a medicine woman. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And, you know, I like talked to her more about that. And there's just this story that was handed down. And that's all I had. And so from this point, I became obsessed with learning about my lineage. I wanted to know this person. I wanted to know this incredible medicine woman who was a part of my lineage and how that was embodied in me. So I went on this hunt for that. And that was the beginning of something completely new.
Wow. And that it's so interesting too to see how when one door closed, another one opened, where you actually found connection and answers of these questions and kind of issues you had with your upbringing and with Christianity and how it was taught to you. And there you are with not only, you know, spirit bringing you answers, but also like your lineage carrying so many elements of this other way of being, other way of relating to yourself and to nature and to spirit. That's wild. So did you ever find out more? Like how do you work with that? I guess the energy and wisdom and power of your ancestral lineage. Like how do you work with that? You know, how have you brought what's there forward for healing and also for creating your life?
Well, after that point, I had really gotten into herbs. Ayahuasca was the one that I was particularly interested in because I was reading a lot of books by Daniel Pinchbeck and Terence McKenna at this time. And actually, before ayahuasca, it was iboga. And I'm like, what? There's this plant out there that can like help cure dis-ease. So I started really exploring that avenue and connecting with plants on an energetic level because, you know, I didn't know where to go to have an ayahuasca ceremony. And this was before it became popularized in the West. And so I went to this farm in Austin. It's this flower farm and it's in North Austin for anyone listening. I wish I could tell you the name of it, but they have some incredible potent herbs. And what they had was ayahuasca ground up. I can go grab it right now if they still have it. And I just got enough to fit this little jar. And I didn't know what my intention was with it at the time. But since then, it's just been my plant ally. So I just keep it in this jar and work with it on an energetic level. And I think that helped evolve me so fast because from that point, it went from being closed-minded. And by closed-minded, I used to be the person to tell gay people they were going to hell. That was me. Like, that's how brainwashed I was. Even though I would say it, I don't think I ever really believed it. And I went back and apologized to every single person, and was like, I am so sorry. What I said to you was not right. This apology barely makes it right. And so from this point, it was just like I was catapulted like lifetimes ahead of where I was. And everything in life suddenly became urgent and purpose driven. So I began to dig in herbs and that took me to North Carolina. I was coming out of a relationship that was not serving me and not serving the person that I was with. And when I was looking at where I want my life to go, I knew I wanted to be working with plants in some capacity. I knew I wanted to be healing people. And actually, a part of the story I meant to say was around the time right before Daniel came to teach, I was waiting for a piano class, and there was this person in the hallway that I'd never seen before. She looked really cool. You know, I was from Dallas, Texas, like very country girl too. And then I moved to Austin for school, and everyone was so hip. And she looked so cool, and I just wanted to talk to her, and so I did. And she gave me her card, and it said psychic, medium, intuitive. And I was like, whoa. And I had also gotten into tarot by this point, and I had offered to do a trade. So I went over to her house, and we had this session, and she had connected me. I don't even think she realizes this. I should tell her. This was a defining moment because not only did she affirm what I already knew, which that my purpose was to help women and children. She affirmed what my aunt had said about having a great grandmother who was a medicine woman and coming through and wanting to help me. She didn't know. She knew nothing. And it was the first time I'm like, wow, being a medium is possible. Like, this is a real thing. How did she know that? Like, you know, and it was just so wild. But the next part is that before we ended this session, I wish I had recorded it. She asked me, is there anything you'd like to ask my and your guides before we go? And I said, well, how do we heal our earth? Climate change is coming, and this is 2010. How do we heal our earth? And she asked, and she was like, well, they're saying if I told you, you couldn't handle it. And I'm like, what do you mean if they told me I can handle it? Tell me. And she's like, no. Your capacity, our way of thinking, literally could not handle it. It's too much for our consciousness. And I'm like, whoa. And so since then, I'm like, okay, I'm going to heal our earth. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to find a bunch of like-minded people who are genuinely good-hearted, who genuinely care for humanity and all of its inhabitants, like, and genuinely wants to create a better world. I'm going to find them. And then we're going to sit in circle. And then I'm going to channel that. And I'm going to ask again, how do we heal our earth? And I would hope at that point we can receive the answer.
Or at least a snippet, right?
So that's really the journey I've been on.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Totally. I love how your mediumship is just affirmed again and again throughout your life too. It's just like, okay, this is real. Hey.
Yeah. And all the times I've ignored it.
Well, it's a whole paradigm that we don't really have constructs or in our quote normal or mainstream society. You know, we're not taught like, hey, if you're a medium, go to medium school. You know, there's not like a curriculum. I mean, there are now. There are now. But like growing up, you know, and your family wasn't exposing to that. But wow. And just to go back like with the ayahuasca, that I think it's so interesting how you've just engaged with it on a plant spirit level, like energetically, you know, and how powerful that's been for you. And I'm curious about more of your work with plant spirits. Like, does that factor a lot into your connection with the earth?
Yes. So I studied herbalism. When I had moved to North Carolina, I moved specifically to study under a shaman and to go through a shamanic herbalism program. And while that's a whole nother story for a different time, I'm not going to get into the details right now. It was life-changing, not in the ways I thought it would be. It took me through 2 years of shadow work, me learning how do herbs fit into that, me comparing myself with other people, because this was also when herbalism was very, very trendy. And I'm guilty of doing the Instagram scroll and seeing many incredible people who were just getting started that have been on this podcast during Dream Freedom Beauty. And just thinking like, wow, I can't be them. I don't think I have it in me to be the type of herbalist that they are. And not knowing where I fit into the world of herbalism and really starting to lose confidence in myself and my ability to bring that medicine to our world, to my community. And so I quit. I quit. Now, I did start working with herbs on a different capacity. I started making smoke blends and, and working with them in that way, and equally as potent. I stopped working with them in the capacity of, okay, I'm going to learn this so that I can heal other people. I'm learning this to heal me. And from that, I stopped identifying as an herbalist. I went through yoga teacher training, still didn't identify as an herbalist. And it wasn't until a few years later that I just started channeling recipes. They would just come in downloads. It's like 4 o'clock in the morning, I'd wake up and it's like, okay, this herb, this herb, this herb, make this. Clear as day. Just like,
For like what kind of things?
or like, mostly skincare.
Cool. Which you have amazing skin. So yeah.
Thank you. So, I made like a whole skincare line. Like after years of not being engaged in herbalism in that way, just channeling it and it coming through so intensely, where it's like, I can't ignore this call. I have to answer it. And it's almost as though I went through a period of mania. It was just the herbs I felt like were living through me. And that's how I got back into it. But even more so, what ended up happening is I started getting this feeling of go pick flowers. And I'm a Taurus through and through, so I love to have my hands in the earth. Like, it's my favorite thing in the whole world. And I had moved to Asheville and we had a secret garden. And so I was able to connect with flowers and just like go out and pick them, or go to these amazing flower farms that are literally all over Asheville and the surrounding areas and pick flowers. And I did this as a way to like help with my anxiety and help with my depression. And so I started creating these arrangements that were just intuitively led. And somehow that led to being a floral designer, which I now am. So I don't know. I don't know what I am. I just love flowers. I love herbs. I love plant medicine. I don't think I have to attach a label to it. I'm just a human that genuinely loves to work with our earth and, give back to it as much as I possibly can. But I had done flowers just as a gift. I did flowers for my sister-in-law's wedding for the sake of just doing flowers. And a lot of people came up and their photographer and videographer were like, you have to start an Instagram account. Like, You're a floral designer. You have to start. And that day I started. And then not too long after that, I'm not a morning person by any means. Um, I was doing UX UI design school, and I had this message like, you're going to go to Trader Joe's the moment you wake up and you're going to buy flowers. I did not go to sleep that night. I was outside of Trader Joe's waiting. I was there before they opened, waiting. The moment they opened, I went in and I'm like, flowers, 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 like just grabbing all kinds of stuff, feeling excited. Mind you, I was also, I had just been laid off, so I was on a very strict budget. So I'm just getting these flowers and also kind of feeling guilty about it. Like, should I be spending my money on this right now? And then I meet this guy who's also, he's buying up all the flowers, and I'm looking at his basket like, bro, I want that. And he had asked, he's like, what are you doing? Like, are you doing a wedding or something? And I was like, no, just arranging for the sake of arranging. And he ended up being this really well-known floral designer, and he has this floral design and event company in Asheville. And he was like, well, if you want a job, hit me up. So I did hit him up. And I got to experience for the first time what it was like to be a floral designer. And it is amazing. And I got to help him with 3 weddings in one day. All like, these weddings were like over $15,000 weddings. Some of them I think were over 50.
Like for just the flowers or for?
Just for the floral design, not even
Wow.
for the event component.
Wow.
And he's telling me this, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is possible? People pay this much money for flowers? And it was amazing. It was an amazing experience. And I knew then, it's like, that I'm meant to work with flowers. Like, this is my calling. This is the capacity in which I'm meant to work with flowers and with herbs. And from that, Sentient Botanicals was born. And I named it Sentient because we're all sentient beings. And I believe that each flower brings this different energy into our lives, and it can impact our frequencies and bring medicine in a way that you don't have to ingest. And it also made me feel more connected to my lineage and my grandpa, because I come from a long lineage of farmers. And I know, like, one day I want to have a flower farm. So that's what I'm working towards now, among a lot of other things. I'm a serial entrepreneur, but like, I know in my heart I'm meant to have a flower farm. So that's my story there.
That's amazing. And I love, you are, I don't know what, it's just a natural talent that you have for arranging, and your bouquets are just stunning. I love this. I was scrolling Instagram one day and I was like, and for folks, for a little context, I like to send Shawna cool things I see on, like, cool flowers and bouquets and stuff. So I saw this one. I was like, oh my gosh, Shawna would love that. And I look at it and it was Shawna. And I was like, dang, she's so amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, that picture, actually, I connected with a photographer, and I'm going to call her out because I think she'd be okay with it. Her name is Taylor Parker. She lives outside of Asheville. Taylor Parker Photography. Huge in my floral design journey, because I started feeling very insecure. I started doing that Instagram scroll again and feeling like, there's so many floral designers. I'm new. How in the world am I going to compete with all these amazing people? And they're, just so many beautiful. And I went to a flower farm again, got the ping to go to this flower farm early in the morning. I was out there picking all these flowers. And when I had gotten home, I had made the arrangement that I wanted to make, and I tagged the flower farm in it. And which is Never Ending Flower Farm in Asheville. Go hit them up. They're amazing. And that's when Taylor messaged me, and she was like, oh my gosh, like, I love your work. please, can I do a photo, a photo shoot with you? And I'm like, me? Little old me? And she's like, yeah. And so we like schedule it, and um yeah, and I like get all these flowers and got the line of product that I had channeled, and she came over and we did a floral shoot, and it was amazing. And then the mind you, this was all when I had been laid off, and that's a whole nother story, but I move away from Asheville to not Victoria, Corpus Christi, Texas. I moved in with my parents, with my husband, to just kind of focus on school and what I was doing, and to figure out like what were our next moves. And I, at the time, I really missed Texas, and I always thought I'd be settling there. And I wanted my husband to experience Texas too and get to know my family in a deeper capacity. And so I moved there, and I was starting to feel very disconnected from flowers because there are no flower farms in that area. Like, I guess it's just too dry. Well, I don't even know. I wouldn't call it dry. I don't know. It's just too hot, I guess. Um, and I was just feeling very depressed, very, very, very depressed. And we ended up making the decision to move back to North Carolina. And I kid you not, the moment I got back, Taylor messaged me and was like, "Hey, are you okay? Like, I haven't seen you posting. I know you go through like depression too. Like, we had talked about that a little bit." And just, she was my lifeline. And she was like, "Let's get together. You're back. Let's do a shoot." And so the flowers that you're commenting on, the ones that you were scrolling through and saw, that was from that shoot.
That's so cool. I love how there's just like, you really do answer the call. You hear that voice, whether it's through your mediumship or just through your intuition, and you just trust it and take that step. And then these synchronicities open up and take you places.
It was a long time of letting go. It wasn't actually, when you and I first connected, you were still doing Dream From Beauty. You put out this call for a show notes writer, and I'm like, I mean, go back to Meet the Team episode and you'll hear more of this, but I had just quit for the first time, quit a career with no backup plan. And that was the first moment of me just surrendering to everything, to the universe. Like, I trust you, guide me. I want to go towards my dharma, my purpose. Tell me how to get there. Like, I'm a servant for our earth. What do I do next? And that's what I do. Like, everything I do is guided. So.
I love that. And I'm grateful. Oh my gosh. You are a gem and a light and a flower in my life.
Same back to you. Except you're more like mushroom.
I'm a mushroom and compost.
Yeah, you're a mushroom and compost. But like in a very happy way.
Happy compost. I'll take it. So I love this, and just your interesting journey. I mean, from being in a very rigid sort of Christian thing, and being all gung-ho on it, but then opening up and finding yourself. And I think it's interesting is from hearing that part of your life, and then just also knowing you and knowing certain things about you, it seems like you've always kind of just not really fit in. Whether it was in Christianity, you were like, yay, Jesus, but you also had all these questions, and it just like wasn't full, it wasn't fully here or there. And then something, I think, it's interesting you got to tap into your ancestry as part of your healing journey. And now with our modern day where we are, and with so much stuff about, I mean, like, ancestral healing is like a thing now, which is great. Like, I want it to be a thing. And with that, there's been a lot of talk of appropriation and then racism. It's like everything's coming to the surface now. Everything's coming to like, okay, all this shadow of humanity is being exposed. And part of that, I think you're in such a unique situation because you are such a blend of literally a blend of lineages, a blend of coming from a very Christian background to being like a witch. Like you have walked these spectrums. So how else does that play up in your life?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. I think because, and for those listening, if you don't know who I am, what I look like, um, I'm very white presenting, but I'm biracial. I'm both black and white. And I wasn't really raised I wasn't raised in a white household. My family is black. I grew up going to my grandma's house with all of the girls lined up in a row to get our hair plaited. Like, I loved getting my hair braided. It was my favorite thing. Like, I grew up in my culture, which, um, yeah, but it's hard to verbalize, to be honest.
I bet. Yeah.
Because the world tries to make everything so black and white, but it's not. It can be this and that. It can be many things. And that's something I learned. And also for more context, I have 3 brothers and 11 sisters. I have a shit ton of cousins, aunts, and uncles. Our family reunions are insane. um, but I'm the only white presenting one. Actually, I have a little cousin now. She's like 4 years old. She's so cute. Um, she's white presenting, but even still, you can tell she's mixed because her hair is not blonde. So also, I have very fair skin. I have a blonde curly hair. I have freckles. I look like a white person. And growing up and, when we're learning about genetics and we're doing, what is the square, the alleles, like,
Oh yeah, alleles and stuff. Yeah.
yeah, I can't think of the particular name, but I do remember being in class and we were doing that and somebody was doing it on their race. And I'd ask my teacher, I'm like, oh, well, how the fuck do I fit into this? Like, I look white. Explain this to me. That's really like how I was like, explain this. Cause I'm so fucking confused.
Oh, like how do their genes come together to have blue eyes or brown eyes or green eyes or black hair or whatever color skin? Is that what you guys were kind of doing in class?
Yeah. And so I'm doing this with, my grandparents and my mom and my dad. My mom's a redhead. And I'm like, how do I look this way? And then like in psychology, there was this moment where I thought I would get the answer. And we were reading this book called What Are You? And it's about being multiracial and like identifying. But still, there was nobody who in this book that was multiracial but identified in an opposite way. Like are presented, I'm sorry, presented in an opposite way. Like, for example, my siblings, they're also biracial, but they present as black. Um, I'm biracial. I present as white. Why don't I look like them? So it was very much like, where do I fit in? And then of course, in my family, it's like, why do you act like a white girl? Why do you dress like a white girl? Um, you know, and then at school, it's like, why are you pretending to be black? The kids would make fun of me. You're not black. I can't tell you how many friends I've had that we'd be friends in school and then finally get to like hang out, and they'd come over to my place for the first time, and their parents wouldn't let them hang out with me anymore because they, for the first time, realized, oh, she has a black dad. Nope. I can't tell you how many boyfriends I've had whose parents were like, nope. So it was very much this journey of not feeling like I fit anywhere. I wasn't good enough. And I really had to dig deep and learn, who am I? Because so far, there's no one that I have met that is like me. Whereas my dad is black, my mom is white, but I have white skin. I have blonde hair. My curls are not as tight as my siblings. And I was also treated differently. My paternal grandmother didn't like my mom because she's white. She let that manifest into our relationship that we have together. And so what ended up happening was, okay, I'm not black enough. I'm not white enough. When I try to dress in a way that makes me feel comfortable, I get made fun of. I get called out for having braids in my hair, for pretending to be something I'm not. So I went the whole different spectrum. Like, I'm going to dye my hair pink. I'm going to dress punk. I'm going to listen to punk music. I was full of rage. Like, no one's going to know. No one can tell me who I am now because this is me. But it wasn't me. It was easier to be that version of me because my entire existence has been, oh, but I'm black. If I try, if I'm sharing a story with some people and I say something that, most white people wouldn't say, like if they do, it'd be pretty disrespectful or appropriation. I have to then preface, oh, but I'm black. So it's just like, oh, it's learning that the world is not black and white. Like, especially in America. America's a melting pot. I doubt now that the kids that are being born and raised in today's society has one or two lineages. I bet they have many from all over. They're probably not just European or just African or just Hispanic. They're probably a little bit of many things. And yeah, I had to get really comfortable. And this is still a process for me. This is something I'm going through to this day. Who am I? Now we have all, anti-racism stuff coming out. And it's like, first of all, I've been doing that work my entire life.
You've been really caught in the middle of it on all sides.
Right. Like, my privilege is education because people, and I'm going to say white presenting people who don't come from a diverse background will think it's okay to say racist things around me because they don't know. And so then I have to educate them and be like, did you just say that? Like, explain to me what you meant by that. Because here's where you're wrong. And by the way, you just offended me because I'm biracial. My family is black. I am also a black woman. And that was very rude, so it's been like, that is my privilege, education. So anti-racism work, educating others on racism, like catching people with their racist remarks. And that's been my life's work. Like, so there's that. I could go down a rabbit hole of this conversation.
I know. I mean, it's wild just from, the few years I've known you and just seeing you have to go through so many different situations where people project onto you, or, people deny you your own experience. It's wild. And it's just like, I really feel for, I mean, any, I really feel for any people of color, and especially for people who are biracial who don't fit in here or there. I mean, that your question of who am I? That's a deep question, and one that I don't know if it'll get answered in this lifetime because of our society and where we are and how slow things are to evolve sometimes. I mean, I definitely open to the possibility of that answer coming through. I'm not saying I hope for you find that answer, but I think it's an evolving thing as our society evolves. I don't know. Tell me more about that, because I don't want to project my situation or my view onto you. This is just what I've noticed.
I'm glad you asked this question, because recently somebody had said I was tone deaf on our social media and really didn't understand what it meant when I said that I'm a Black woman with white skin. And it's because, are you Black? Yes. Are you white? Yes. I'm both. And that just seemed to be a hard concept to understand, but I know that the point she was trying to make is that my experience is much different than my Black presenting sisters. To an extent. I share in the same collective trauma that our families, our lineages went through. I've been racially profiled. I can't tell you how many times, especially being in an interracial family where I'm with my parents, and people are racist. We were in this place in Colorado, visiting my aunt. It's supposed to be a good time. We went to a restaurant and we walk in, and it's, my dad and my mom and me and my siblings, and we were dressed nice. We dressed nice. And somebody was like, well, if it was eat for free night, I would have went somewhere else. To our faces. And my mom is not a quiet woman. So of course she went off. But that's just a cosmic experience in my life. So I too understand what it's like to be Black. I too understand what it's like to be white. I understand what it's like to be both. And I understand what it's like to be in an interracial family. And, my brothers and sisters who are Black presenting do have the experience of being Black presenting. And I'm extremely attuned to that. I know what they go through. I've experienced it firsthand. I've experienced being pulled over because when a police officer scans my license, it comes up as African American. And for that police officer to come to my window, see a white woman, and then go to my brother's side of the window and start harassing him. I know what that's like. So is the experience of my Black presenting sisters different than mine because I have privilege of having white skin? Absolutely. To an extent. And it's so frustrating. And, somebody had said that I was showing my white privilege by not sharing my story. And first of all, it's I'm going to share my story when I feel like it, but I also want to explain why I didn't share my story sooner. And that's because, at the height of the BLM movement and, internally, I'm deciding what part of this do I want to play? What is my role in this? And how can I serve our community in the best way that I can, the best way that we can? And, I'm going through these sites to find, healing, to find a reprieve, to find somebody that I can talk to about what I'm experiencing. And I find the site that I thought would be this place. And I go to this class and it says for Black folks only. And I read it and I'm like, oh my gosh, it sounds so amazing. Like, this is what I need. I go to check out to sign up for it. And it's like, white presenting and white allies go here. Okay. I'm white presenting, but I'm also Black. So that's probably the first time in a while where I really had to question myself again. Who am I? Because if my full-blooded sibling, who has the same mom and same dad as me, but he presents as Black, can take this Black folks only class, where the fuck do I fit in? Where's my solace? Who can I talk to? Because so far, I don't fit in anyone's box. So I did. I was not ready to share my story at that time. You know, we planned that episode. We were ready for it. I was excited. I was excited for others to know that you can come to me. If you have this experience or for any reason, you can come to me. But in that moment, I wasn't ready because I was questioning again. And I had to find professional help. Literally, I had to hire professional help. I had to have conversations with my family. You know, like, so it's been very frustrating. And the outcome of this, and for that particular instance of this person that was like trying to call me out and gaslight my experience, you know, my aunt had said, she was like, I wouldn't block her. Talk to her. I'm like, I don't want to talk to her. Like, I don't have time for this. She's like, no, that is your privilege. Whew, mind blown. Like, I had already known that, but for my aunt to reflect that back, my Black presenting aunt to be like, you are a Black woman, but you are also a white woman. Your privilege is to educate people who don't understand. So I'm going through this experience just like everyone else is going through it. I have a lot to learn. And I'm not here to play victim. I'm simply here to share that there are many ways of being. There are many ways to look at the world. And now it's like racism has been exposed in a way like never before. Yeah, we had the March for Equality, but then racism went underground in a way. It wasn't being called out, but now it's being called out. Now people are being made aware of when something they say is inappropriate. But now we're at a point in history. What are we going to do with that? Are we going to cause more of a divide? Or are we as a collective going to figure out how to come together? Because not only am I Black and white, or are my sisters who their mom is Black and my dad is Black, and so they're full Black, but they look biracial, they're going to have an entirely different experience. So not only are they who they are, and are other people who they are, at the core of it all, we're fucking humans. What are we going to do with it? And even more so, how are women going to help support each other? Because I have seen so many women calling out other women, not giving them a chance to explain who they are, where they come from. That's toxic. We can't grow from that. I can't fight fire with fire. But what I am willing to do is have a conversation. So that's why I'm here now, is to have this conversation. Right now, we have a choice to make. We can move forward and we can try to heal and we can educate from a place of compassion, because that's the only way people are going to understand. It's the only way.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing your story and the just courage it takes to be neither black nor white, but both black and white in this modern society, and speak up about your experience.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to say, like, I don't even, like, know what else to share. Like, sure, there are many stories. For instance, my dad is one of 7 kids. None of them are the same shade. Same mom, same dad. None of them. Here's what I found out later, after digging into my ancestry. My family, not all of them, are more fair-skinned because I had a great-grandmother who was raped by a white man. I found that because of a white cousin I had no idea existed. We connected and she told me. That was her great-grandfather
Wow.
who raped my great-grandmother. And we sought healing in each other for that. Because the mistakes of our family are passed down as burdens on us. Whether we know that consciously, these are burdens. These are lineage trauma. You know, the whole point of ancestral healing is to heal this shit. You know, and it wasn't uncommon for masters to rape their slaves. There's a whole spectrum of diversity in America. There's no one way of being. I don't know what else to say to that. It's just, it is what it is.
So be it.
Mm-hmm.
I love your question of how do we move forward, you know, and your vision to unify, of like, are we going to fragment and fragment and fragment, or are we going to unify all the little fragments while honoring and respecting and celebrating each of our respective lineages and differences, but unifying in our humanity?
Exactly. Like yes. See color. See people for their culture. But learn to understand it and respect it and respect the ways that it's different from how you know the world to be.
Do you feel complete on that? Because you said you don't know what else to say. Just want to check.
I'm complete for now.
To be continued. Amazing. Well, we have an amazing, I think it's amazing, I've used it for myself, resource for our white listeners who want to engage in anti-racism work. We have a resource that we've put together that links to a lot of other resources. It's a great hub and starting point on our website. In our shop, it's free, but it's just easier to organize it there. So anyone who's fired up, can go check that out. And yeah, Shawna, where can people find you? I mean, obviously Earthspeak, but beyond that, where can they find the personal world of Shawna and what you offer?
I offer many things, but the one I love the most is floral design. So if you want to work with me or talk to me about herbs and flowers, you can do that on Instagram, sentient.botanicals, SCENT with sentient, and sentientbotanicals.co is also where you can find me. Yeah, if what I said resonated, if you have a shared experience and you don't know who to talk to about it, talk to me. I'm here. I'm open. But I forgot to include this disclaimer, and I'm going to say it now. I'm not interested in addressing negativity associated to this conversation. I don't want to hear your opinions. So I'll tell you right now, if you come at it like that, I'm not gonna address it. I'm at a point in my life where I just want to help humans evolve and advance, and at this time, that's all I have time for.
You're not here to battle. You're here to help the people who are ready to have a conversation, to listen, to act. That's what it sounds like. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Awesome. Y'all heard it. Cool. And so if someone does have an experience, if someone is biracial or comes from many different lineages and is, going on a similar journey of having to integrate these different identities and stories and histories and just ways of being, is your personal sentient botanicals the best way to reach out?
Yeah, definitely. You can also email me at Shawna@earthspeak.love, and I'll get back to you there. We are very busy growing our collective, but I'll respond as soon as I can.
Rad. Super cool. So I guess thanks for being on the show. It feels funny to say thank you since you are Earth Speak. Thanks for being the show behind the scenes, and for being on the show and sharing your story and your magic. I am so grateful to just hear more. I always love hearing your stories, whether they're new or whether they're ones I've heard. I always hear them with new ears, and I just love just the magic and the beauty and power that has woven through your life and that lives in you and is you. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm introverted. I don't like public speaking. Thanks to everyone listening. See you on the flip side.
All the roads are windy.
Listen to over 200 free EarthSpeak podcast episodes on your favorite podcast app and visit earthspeak.love to learn about our collective community and workshops.